I'm Catherine Hayes, 34 years old, and I was sitting at my kitchen table holding a letter that arrived by certified mail, no return address. Just my father's handwriting across the front of the envelope. It read, "Do not attempt to attend the family reunion. We hadn't spoken in nearly 3 years, not since my mother's funeral, and not since I found the records that changed everything." I stared at those 7 words like they were carved in stone, folded the letter back into its envelope, and texted him a single word. Understood. He had no idea I'd already rented the house next door to their reunion venue. Before I get into how it all unraveled, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if you've ever had to set boundaries with your own family, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories, just like this one. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, in a home where the carpets were always vacuumed in straight lines, and the silver was polished for guests who never arrived. My father, Judge Franklin Hayes, was the kind of man people quoted in newspapers and whispered about in courthouse halls. At home, he quoted case law at the dinner table and reminded us constantly that reputation was everything. My mother, Marjorie, was softer. A quiet woman who drove me to every piano recital, packed every lunch just right, and watched the world through tired eyes that rarely met mine. She was warm in gestures, but rarely in presence, like someone fading behind the curtain of someone else's life. I was the middle child, the dependable one. Daniel, my older brother, had already been chosen to carry the family legacy, and Brooke, our younger sister, was the wild card who never played by the rules. That left me. I graduated top of my class, earned a full scholarship to Cornell, and started my own architecture firm by the time I was 30. Everything I built, every award, every client I built, hoping my father would one day look at me and see more than obligation. He never said he was proud. He never said he wasn't. The first real fracture came 3 years ago when Jonathan, my fiancé, ended our engagement without warning. He didn't give reasons, just vague regrets and a quiet apology. When I pressed, he said only this: "Your father told me something that changed everything." I begged for answers. He packed his things. That silence hollowed me out for months. Then 2 years ago, my mother fell ill. Pancreatic cancer. Swift, cruel. In her final days, she gripped my hand in a hospital room filled with machines and unfinished thoughts. "There's something about your father. About you," she said. But she never finished the sentence. My father stepped through the doorway, and whatever was about to be said vanished. She died the next morning. I tried to grieve. I tried to understand. But something had shifted in me. There was a weight in my chest that didn't come from sorrow. It came from something else, something I couldn't name yet. That summer, while sorting through her things, I found a small wooden box tucked deep in her closet. Inside were letters, dozens of them, none addressed to her by name. The handwriting was unfamiliar. Some were torn. Most were desperate. Does she have my eyes? Please, just one photo. I couldn't make sense of them, but I would, because a month later, standing inside a dusty storage unit that belonged to our family for decades, I found something else, something that would burn the rest of my history to the ground. That storage unit was hotter than I expected. Late summer sun pressed against the corrugated walls, baking the dust right into my skin. I had dragged in a folding chair, a cooler of water, and a stack of trash bags, thinking I'd be there maybe 2 hours. But once I started going through the boxes, old decorations, camping gear, family photo albums, I lost track of time. The deeper I went, the older everything became. I found my dad's law school textbooks yellowed at the edges. Boxes labeled Marjorie Holiday Dishes, and Brooke High School sat stacked beneath heavier cartons full of papers. And then behind a rack of broken skis and an old wooden sled, I saw it. A black fireproof safe, the kind you don't keep birthday cards in. I hauled it forward, knees cracking as I crouched. There was no key, but it had a combination dial. I stared at it for a long time, thinking. My mom's birthday came to mind. February 12th. I turned the dial. Click. Inside were birth certificates, marriage licenses, property deeds, and one sealed manila envelope, my name handwritten across the front. I opened it carefully. The first page was a birth certificate, same date, same place, but the names listed under mother and father were strangers, Donna and Michael Reynolds. The next document was an adoption agreement, signed by Franklin and Marjorie Hayes, dated 6 months after I was born, and then the court records, transcripts from a corruption case. My biological parents had been key witnesses. Judge Franklin Hayes had presided. I sat on the floor of that storage unit for almost an hour before I could move again. I didn't cry, not right away. I just kept reading the same documents over and over until the words stopped making sense. When I finally stood, my legs were stiff. I gathered everything into a folder and drove straight to my father's house. He was in the study reading glasses halfway down his nose, the same way he always looked when grading court files even in retirement. When he saw what I was holding, his expression changed. Not confusion, not guilt, just cold recognition. "Where did you get those?" he asked. "Does it matter?" I said. "Were you ever going to tell me?" He stood slowly. It was necessary, to protect the family name. The family name. I stared at him. Those people were my parents. "We are your parents," he said firmly. "We raised you. We gave you a better life than they ever could." "Who am I then?" I asked. "Because I sure as hell don't know anymore. You're being dramatic, Catherine. This changes nothing. It changes everything." He didn't flinch. The conversation that followed peeled the last layer of trust away. He admitted Daniel had known for years. My older brother, the golden child, had been told when he started law school. He needed to understand the family's history, my father said, as if my entire existence had been a footnote in a legacy speech. And Jonathan, my ex, my father had told him about my criminal bloodline, suggested it could damage his career if he married into that. That was why he left. The next day, my father called a family meeting. Daniel was already waiting when I arrived. He avoided my eyes. Brooke showed up late, leaning against the doorframe like she didn't want to be there. "Catherine has discovered her adoption," my father announced. "This information is not to be discussed outside this room." I looked around, waiting for someone to object. No one did. "Our family's reputation is paramount," he continued. "We will not be tied to people involved in criminal activity." "You mean my real parents," I said. "Your biological parents were dangerous. This was about safety for you and for us." "You don't know that," I said. "You have no right to erase where I came from." Daniel cleared his throat. "Katie, think about what this could do to Dad's standing, to my career. It's not about hiding, it's about minimizing damage." I turned to Brooke. "And you?" She crossed her arms. "I've known since I was 19. Mom told me." "You never said anything?" She shrugged. Dad made it clear my inheritance depended on staying quiet. That was the moment something in me cracked. I walked out of the house and didn't speak to any of them for months. The grief wasn't just about being adopted. It was about being lied to, groomed, shaped into someone else's ideal without ever being given the truth. I stopped answering emails, let calls go to voicemail. Sleep didn't come easy, and when it did, I woke up feeling like I didn't recognize my own life. I'd stare at my office wall and wonder how many parts of me had been designed by people who didn't tell me the truth. Therapy helped a little, but what helped more was anger. Real, focused, quiet anger. That's when I hired Marcus Jennings. He was discreet, experienced, and didn't flinch when I handed him the documents. "I want to know who they were," I said. "Donna and Michael Reynolds. I want everything." He leaned back in his chair, eyes scanning the pages. "This won't be easy. These records are decades old, and if your father wanted them buried, I don't care how hard it is," I told him. "I need to know." 2 weeks later, Marcus called. "They weren't criminals," he said. "Your biological parents testified in a corruption case involving city officials and a construction firm. Your father was the presiding judge. Then why lie? That's where it gets complicated," he said. "After the trial, there's barely a trace of them. It's like they vanished. Witness protection. My biological mother was alive, living under a different name in a small town 3 states away. My father had died in a car crash when I was 12. The accident had never been investigated. Marcus kept digging. There was no legal trail that made sense. My adoption papers existed, but the process was irregular. It looked like my father had used his influence to take me. And Donna, my mother, she had been searching for me for years. She'd written letters. Hired investigators. She had sent those letters to Marjorie. All those notes I found in the wooden box. Does she have my eyes? Please send a photo. They weren't from a stranger. They were from my mother, and I had no idea if she even knew I'd read them. Marcus kept digging. Every few days he'd send me updates, bits and pieces that didn't always make sense on their own. Donna Reynolds. My biological mother had gone into hiding not long after the trial. Her name had been changed through the Witness Protection Program. The address she'd been moved to was sealed. But Marcus had a way of finding things. Old court filing references, misspelled aliases in unrelated dockets, mentions of relocation grants in obscure county budgets. One night I got a call. His voice was steady. She's alive. Living under a different name in Missouri. Small town. Population under 4,000. I didn't know what to say at first. She's been trying to find you, he added. For years. The letters. The handwriting. My hands went cold. Did she ever stop looking, I asked. No, Marcus said. She didn't. He paused. Your biological father died when you were 12. Car crash. Not much detail in the report, but there were things that didn't add up. I'm still checking. I sat in my office lights, dimmed the city quiet outside. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, the creak of the heating vents as the house settled. I thought about Donna, what it meant to keep searching for a child and never get answers, what it meant to write letters and never receive a reply. And I thought about Marjorie, my adoptive mother, keeping those letters hidden. Marcus called again a few days later. You're not going to like this next part, he said, but you need to hear it. He explained how Donna and Michael Reynolds were separated from me. After testifying in the corruption case, they were told that their infant daughter, that was me, would be placed temporarily with a foster family until the government could finalize a safe relocation. But that never happened, Marcus said. According to internal memos I found through a contact, Judge Hayes intervened directly, claimed it was safer to keep you in a stable home. He presented it like an emergency solution, and no one questioned it. They should have. But this was the early 90s. Smaller system, less oversight. And your dad was respected, connected, persuasive. There had to be more, I said. There was, he said. The adoption wasn't just irregular. It bypassed several steps. Donna never consented in writing. Michael never signed anything. They didn't even know where you were placed. My chest tightened. How is that even possible? He had help, Marcus said. He didn't do this alone. I leaned back against the wall, heart racing. There's one more thing, he added. Your mom, Donna, she tried to contact the courts years later, filed for records, hired a lawyer. Every request got blocked, denied for security reasons. Silence hung between us. Marcus cleared his throat. She never gave up. Not once. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. I want to meet her, I said. I figured you would. A week passed before we made contact. Marcus reached out to her through a secure line, explained who I was, what I knew, what I wanted. Her reply came through email. Simple, emotional, typed all in lowercase. I've been looking for you for so long. There hasn't been a single day I didn't think about you. Thank you for finding me. I stared at those lines until they blurred. In the days that followed, I gathered everything Marcus had found. I made copies, stored backups, sorted documents into folders. I wanted to be prepared partly for myself, partly because something in me had shifted. This wasn't just about me anymore. It wasn't even just about Donna. There were other names. Marcus had started pulling up cases where Judge Hayes had ruled decisively, often with strange outcomes. There was a land developer who lost everything when my father ruled against him in a zoning case, despite having the stronger legal claim. Turns out the winning side had financial ties to one of my father's in-laws. There was a woman named Lydia who had filed a harassment complaint against a county official. My father dismissed her case on procedural grounds. She lost her job shortly after. Marcus brought me a list of names. You might want to speak with them, he said. They're willing. I met Lydia first. We sat in a coffee shop on a quiet side street. She wore a blue cardigan and kept her purse in her lap the entire time. I was young, she said. Naive. I believed the system worked. Then your father told me straight-faced that my experience didn't meet the legal definition. It broke me. I listened, asked questions, took notes. Then I met Robert, a former bailiff. Then Eleanor, a retired clerk. Each person added another layer. Each story pointed to a pattern. It wasn't just me. My father hadn't simply taken a baby under false pretenses. He'd built a reputation out of half-truths and erased details. I started looking at photos differently. Family portraits, newspaper clippings in his study, commendations from bar associations, all of it staged. I called Jonathan, my ex. He answered on the second try. His voice was tense. "I'm not calling to rehash anything I said. I just have questions." A long pause followed. Then, "Okay." We met at a small restaurant halfway between our offices. He looked tired, older. He didn't smile. "I'm sorry," he said. I nodded. "My father told you." He exhaled. He showed me police reports. Said your birth parents were dangerous. Said marrying you could reflect badly on my firm. You believed him. He looked away. He was a federal judge, Catherine. Everything about him screamed authority. He said if I married you, he'd make sure every environmental case I brought would hit delays. Quiet blocks. No official record, just resistance. I sat with that for a moment. "So you walked away." "I panicked," he said. "I didn't know how to fight him. I should have told you. I didn't. I was a coward. I didn't respond." He reached for his glass, then stopped. "I did love you," he said. I stood. "I know." That night I printed every document, made 3 sets, sent copies to Marcus, and locked one in a fireproof safe of my own, because the next step was coming, and I knew my father wouldn't let it go unanswered. The letter came on a Tuesday, certified mail. My name printed neatly on the envelope, just like every birthday card and school permission slip growing up. I knew the handwriting before I opened it. The letter was brief. The annual Hayes family reunion would take place from July 15th to the 22nd at Lake Lanier, as tradition dictated. Given recent developments, my father wrote, I was not to attend. This is for the best interest of all concerned. No greeting, no signature beyond Franklin Hayes. I read it twice. Then I folded it, slid it back into the envelope, and texted him one word, understood. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Brooke. Did you get Dad's letter? Yes, loud and clear. You should know he's planning something big. They're expecting an announcement during the reunion. Supreme Court nomination. I didn't respond right away. He can't afford a scandal right now, she added. That's why he wants you gone. I stared out my living room window. Beyond the trees, a squirrel darted across the fence line. The world outside didn't seem to care that everything had changed. I picked up the phone and called Marcus. He's going for the Supreme Court, I said. Marcus didn't hesitate. Then this is the window. That night I started looking at properties near the reunion site. My father always reserved Lakeside Hall, a sprawling estate with a private dock, tennis courts, and catering staff on call. A symbol of the Hayes name just large enough to impress. 2 miles down the shore sat another estate. Smaller, quieter. Willowbrook House. It had been booked, but the reservation had just been canceled. I'll take it, I told the manager, for the full week. I wired the deposit that afternoon. Over the next 3 weeks, I made a list. Everyone Marcus had interviewed. Donna, Lydia, Robert, the land developer, Eleanor, even Jonathan. People whose stories pointed to the same man wearing different masks. I didn't call it revenge. I didn't need to. This wasn't about the headlines. It wasn't about ruining a nomination. It was about telling the truth to the people who'd never had a chance to speak. I reached out to Rachel Lane, an investigative journalist Marcus recommended. She specialized in judicial misconduct and had spent years documenting abuse of power cases. She agreed to attend. I'm not looking to publish yet, she said during our first phone call, but I can help you document things properly. Interviews, statements, a full archive. Is it risky, I asked. There's always risk when someone powerful has something to lose. The week before the reunion, I stopped sleeping well. I'd wake up at 3, stare at the ceiling, then make lists what to print, who needed transportation, what security precautions to take. I hired a small team to help. Not event planners, just people I trusted, the kind who knew how to work quietly. By the time July 15th arrived, Willowbrook was ready. I stood in the upstairs bedroom watching through the curtain as caterers unloaded vans next door. My father's car was already parked out front. Daniel was with him. I called downstairs. Let me know when Brooke arrives, I told Marcus. At noon, the first guests began arriving at Willowbrook. Eleanor came with 2 boxes of old files. Robert followed, clutching a folder of court memos and transcripts. Lydia brought a single envelope and a quiet determination. By 2 o'clock, the dining room table was lined with documents, testimonies, financial records, recordings. Each file carried the weight of a life shaped by one man's decisions. At 2:30, a silver sedan pulled into the driveway. Marcus glanced down at his tablet. That's her. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. Donna got out of the car slowly. She looked around, her eyes scanning the front of the house as if afraid it might vanish. I walked toward her. She froze for a second, then took one small step forward. "Catherine," she whispered. I nodded. She reached up and touched my cheek. "My baby girl." We stood there for a moment, not saying anything more. Inside, I introduced her to the others. She sat with them, shared her story again, this time in her own voice. She talked about the trial, the threats, the move into witness protection, how she was told I'd be placed with a temporary family. We were told it was safer, she said, but the placement became permanent. Every attempt to find her, every appeal was blocked. They said it would risk our protection. Did you ever find out why Rachel asked? Donna nodded. Years later, a retired U.S. Marshal told me privately Judge Hayes had intervened, said returning the child wasn't in her best interest, that we were unstable, unsafe. Her voice never broke. She didn't cry, but she held my hand the entire time. At 4 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. Brooke. "I'm not going to Dad's reunion. Can I come to yours?" I waited a few moments before responding. "Yes. Side door. Come alone." She arrived half an hour later. Everyone turned when she entered. "I know I'm not the person you wanted to see," she said, "but I've been collecting things too. For years." She opened her laptop. On the screen were folders, emails, financial records, audio clips. I never reconciled with Dad. That was a lie. I played the part because it was the only way to get close enough. She played a recording. My father's voice, clipped and precise, discussing the reassignment of a case. Another clip talking about zoning permissions with a man later revealed to be his brother-in-law. "I didn't tell you," she said quietly to me, "because you're a terrible liar." He would have known. I needed him to believe I was on his side. The room was quiet. Outside, across the lawn, the lights at Lakeside Hall glowed brighter. Cars lined the drive. A long table had been set up for a formal dinner, the place where he planned to give his speech. I stepped out onto the back patio. Donna joined me. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" she asked. I looked across the water. If it was just about me, I said maybe I could let it go, but it's not just about me. She nodded. "Then we'll do it together." From across the lake, I saw my father step out onto the terrace. Daniel stood beside him. A hush fell over the crowd as he raised his hand for attention, but then he paused. He turned and looked directly at Willowbrook. Our lights were on. Our guests were visible through the windows. I saw the change in his face, even from that distance. Marcus stepped onto the porch beside me. "He's seen us." My phone rang. I looked down at the screen. Franklin Hayes. 3 years of silence, and now he was calling. I let the phone ring twice before I answered. "What do you think you're doing?" my father said. His voice was clipped cold. "Hosting a family reunion," I replied. "Just not the family you chose for me." There was a pause long enough to feel like a calculation. Then he hung up. 20 minutes later, his black Mercedes pulled into the Willowbrook driveway. Behind it, Daniel's Range Rover. I met them at the front door. Donna stood beside me steady. My father stopped short when he saw her. "Donna Reynolds," he said, barely audible. "Hello, Frank," she said. "It's been a long time." Daniel looked from her to me, confusion tightening his brow. "Who is this?" "She's my biological mother," I said, "the woman whose baby was taken from her by Judge Franklin Hayes." His face shifted. "This is absurd," my father said. "You're creating a scene based on misunderstandings and half-truths. Then you won't mind stepping inside to help clear them up." I opened the door and let them in. The room fell quiet. Everyone had gathered in the main parlor. Folders sat open on the table, printouts, audio transcripts, screens showing evidence files. My father's gaze moved across the room. Former clerks, a land developer, a woman whose case had been dismissed. Rachel Lane sat near the back, her pen still. "What exactly is this?" he asked. "This is accountability," I said. "Everyone in this room has a story about how you used your power to control outcomes that served your interests. Some were silenced, some were ruined, some lost more than that." He gave a short laugh. "These are serious allegations coming from people with personal grievances. If they had real evidence of misconduct, they would have filed complaints." Eleanor stepped forward. "Many of us did. They vanished, or were dismissed by colleagues who owed you favors." I gestured to the evidence table. "These are the complaints, the accounts, the documents that weren't supposed to survive." He scanned the pages. A set of financial records. Bank deposits that aligned with certain rulings. Emails between city officials and his in-laws. Court memos altered after submission. Daniel picked up one of the files, flipping through it slowly. "Dad," he said, "what is this?" "It's a smear campaign," my father said sharply. "Coordinated lies, exaggerated memories, circumstantial links." Donna stepped forward. "You used your bench to take my child." My father stiffened. "You and your wife had trouble having another child," she said. "So you took mine. Told yourself it was for her own good, that I was a risk." Daniel turned toward him. "Is that why we suddenly had a sister?" he asked. "You always said Catherine was a gift, after Mom's miscarriages." My father didn't answer right away. "Your mother wanted another child," he said finally. "We'd been through so much loss, and the Reynolds baby was going into the system. I intervened to make sure she had stability." "You didn't give her stability," Donna said. "You gave her a script. You told her who to be, and you told me to disappear." Other voices joined in. Lydia spoke about her harassment case, how she was dismissed in 3 minutes. The land developer recounted how a zoning case was swayed in favor of a firm with ties to the Hayes family. Eleanor shared emails communications she wasn't supposed to save. My father stood rigid in the center of it all, watching the stories pile up. His responses came slower, quieter. Rachel, the journalist, leaned forward. "Individually, these cases might seem circumstantial, but together they form a consistent pattern. The Senate Judiciary Committee would likely see it that way, especially during a nomination process." His jaw clenched. "Catherine," he said, turning to me, voice lower, "let's talk privately. I understand you're angry about the adoption. I should have handled that differently. But dragging all this out in public, it doesn't help anyone. It helps the truth," I said. "That's what matters now. I've always tried to do what's best for the family," he said. "Everything I've done was to build something meaningful for you, for Daniel." "And what did it cost?" I asked. "What did you bury to make it look perfect?" Just then the front door opened again. Brooke stepped inside. Behind her were 2 of our cousins from Lakeside Hall. My father's eyes darkened. "Brooke, what have you done?" She walked past him. "What Mom asked me to do." He stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "She made me promise," Brooke said, "before she died. She couldn't live with what you'd done. She asked me to help Catherine find out." For a moment he didn't speak. Then he looked older, shoulders sagged, jaw loose. "You don't understand," he said. "The sacrifices I made, the compromises required to hold that seat, to build that name. We understand exactly," I said. "That's why we're here." He turned back to me. "If you stop this now, if you let everyone go home and put the files away, I'll welcome you back. We'll deal with it as a family, quietly." For a second, the room was still. I looked at the people around me. The woman who lost her career, the man who lost his land, the mother who lost her child. Then I turned back to him. "No," I said. "I won't be silenced again." Outside, I saw a flash through the window. Another. Reporters had arrived. Cameras now pointed toward Willowbrook. This would not stay private. Daniel turned to our father. His face was pale. "This is going to come out," he said. "All of it." My father stepped toward him. "You're my son. You stand with me." Daniel didn't move. "I'm an officer of the court," he said quietly. "I can't stand with this." My father looked at me one last time. "You're making a mistake." I didn't answer. He walked out without another word. Daniel followed after a pause. The door shut behind them. I stood still for a long time. Then I sat down, surrounded by everyone who had come forward. There was more to do, but something had shifted. I stayed seated after the door closed behind them. A low hum filled the room, papers, rustling cups being refilled, hushed voices circling around what had just happened. Donna was still by my side, one hand resting lightly on my arm. The sun had dipped lower, casting golden shadows across the hardwood floors. I walked back out onto the porch, needing the quiet. Behind me, I could hear Brooke speaking with Rachel. Across the lawn, a few reporters were still clustered at the edge of the property, trying to catch glimpses through the windows. Marcus came outside. He handed me a folder. "He left behind this one," he said. Daniel was holding it. "Looks like internal communication from the nomination committee." I flipped it open. It included preliminary background questions, timelines assigned, ethics affidavit. At the bottom, one line stood out: "Have you ever knowingly withheld information that could impact your impartiality on the bench?" Inside the house, Lydia and Eleanor were helping organize the statements. People were documenting what they'd seen, what they'd experienced, what they had lost. Robert sat with Rachel, detailing a case where a key witness had been ignored entirely. By 9 o'clock, the rooms were quiet again. Most guests had left or retired to the upstairs bedrooms. Donna and I sat on the back steps. The sky was a deep blue now, the lake calm. "I always imagined this moment," she said softly. "But I never thought it would look like this." I looked over at her. Me neither. She leaned forward, hands clasped between her knees. "For so long, I thought if I just had one picture, just knew where you were, if you were safe, it would be enough." I waited. "But it wasn't," she said. "Not really." I nodded. "Did you ever see me?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, they blocked every request. I hired someone once before your father shut it down. He said you were with a family in Louisville. That's all I knew. When the letters didn't come back, I hoped that meant they were being read. I didn't tell her about the wooden box. Not yet. The next morning, the headlines broke. Nomination stalled. Amid misconduct allegations, respected federal judge under scrutiny. Sources cite family gathering as source of leak. Daniel texted me just after 7. Nomination pulled. Internal investigation opened. We need to talk. He came by 2 days later. No tie, no briefcase, just a tired expression and a paper bag of coffee. We sat in the living room. The house was still. Donna had gone for a walk with Brooke. "I should have told you when I found out," he said. "I kept telling myself I was protecting you. But the truth is, I was protecting him, and me." I waited. He glanced toward the window. "Everything I built in his shadow. He mentored me. He opened doors. If I admitted what he did to you, what he did to Donna, I'd have to admit that none of it was clean." "I get it," I said. "But it wasn't right," he added. "And I'm sorry." He reached into his coat pocket and handed me a small envelope. Inside was a photo of our mother Marjorie sitting at the edge of the garden holding me as a toddler. "She kept this in her drawer," Daniel said. "I thought you should have it." That night, Brooke came back with takeout and sat at the kitchen island while I loaded the dishwasher. "I always thought you were the lucky one," she said. "Dad's favorite, the one who could do no wrong." I looked at her. "I never realized you were just as trapped," she continued, "just in a different way. We didn't say much after that." By the end of the week, the calls stopped, the media stories slowed, but the investigation continued. Rachel kept in touch. She wasn't publishing anything yet, not until everything was verified, cross-checked, documented. I started receiving emails. From strangers, from people who had once worked with my father, from families who remembered the outcomes of certain cases but never understood why the results felt wrong. One woman wrote, "Your story helped me understand my own. Thank you for not staying silent." I printed it and tucked it into my desk drawer. Donna and I met once a week, sometimes at Willowbrook, sometimes in town. She showed me photos of Michael, my biological father. He had a quiet smile and kind eyes. One night over coffee, she said, "You have his temper. Not angry, but sharp. Quick to spot the cracks." We sat for a long time flipping through albums. I saw a childhood that could have been. And I realized I hadn't lost everything. I had just been given something new. It was quiet in the house the night the last reporter left. The porch lights were still on, but inside we had dimmed everything down. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the soft murmur of Donna's voice upstairs as she talked to Rachel about timelines. Brooke was in the guest room reorganizing files into labeled envelopes. I opened the kitchen window. The lake air drifted in cool and steady. On the table sat the final copy of our compiled evidence pages of court documents, audio recordings, financial trails, written testimonies, and the adoption paperwork that started it all. The following morning, I took a walk through the back trails near Willowbrook. The path was muddy from rain the night before, but the sky was clear. Every step felt heavier than the last, like something final had been set in motion. When I got back to the house, Marcus was waiting on the porch. He handed me a folded newspaper. Front page, Federal Judge Franklin Hayes withdraws from public life. Amid allegations of judicial abuse. I read it twice. He'd issued a statement to the press through his attorney. Regret, denial, a vague promise to cooperate. Daniel texted again later that afternoon. He's moved out of the city. Staying with a friend in Vermont? Not speaking to anyone. I didn't answer right away. That weekend I hosted a gathering. Nothing formal, just something different from everything that had come before. We met at a public park outside the city. No rentals, no caterers, just potluck dishes, paper plates, and a folding table covered in secondhand cloth. Donna brought lemon bars. Lydia showed up with deviled eggs. Eleanor brought a photo album from her clerkship years. Even Robert, who had always seemed reserved, arrived with a tray of iced tea and 2 folding chairs. Rachel came too. She didn't bring her notebook, just a blanket and a cooler. Brooke helped set up the tables. Daniel showed up later with his wife, quiet but present. We sat in mismatched lawn chairs. Kids played in the grass. Someone brought a guitar, though no one really played it. I didn't give a speech, but when people asked what we were celebrating, I said, connection, truth, the things we had to fight for. Donna pulled me aside before sundown. You okay? She asked. I nodded. It's strange, I said. The Hayes family reunion used to be about who sat where, which hotel they stayed in. Now I'm sitting on a picnic blanket eating potato salad with people who were once strangers. Donna smiled. And yet it feels more like family. She reached for my hand. You did something none of us could. You stopped him, not with hatred, with truth. I didn't know how to respond. So I just squeezed her hand back. As the sun lowered, the shadows grew longer across the grass. A few families began packing up folding chairs, scooping leftovers into foil. I stayed behind to collect trash and stack the empty trays. When it was nearly dark, I sat alone at the table and looked out at the open field. Donna joined me again, carrying a manila envelope. He sent this, she said. To my address. I thought you should read it in your own time. I didn't open it then. We stood together until the last car drove off. Later that night, back at my apartment, I laid the envelope on the kitchen counter. It sat there for 3 days before I opened it. The letter was handwritten, just like all the others. But this one was different. Catherine words don't mean much after everything, but still I have to try. I told myself I was protecting you. I convinced myself it was justice. I told myself Donna was unstable, that you'd be safer in a world I could control. I lied to you. I lied to myself. Every step I took after that, every ruling, every decision, it got easier. That first compromise opened a door I never fully closed again. You didn't deserve to be a part of that. I don't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't. But if you're willing to meet, I'll answer every question. I owe you that much. Franklin Hayes. I folded it carefully and placed it back inside the envelope. The next afternoon, I called Donna. Would you come with me? I asked. She didn't hesitate. Of course. We met him at a diner halfway between our towns. He looked older. Not just tired, smaller somehow. He stood when we walked in but didn't reach for my hand. Donna ordered coffee. I didn't order anything. He didn't try to defend himself. When I asked about the court order, he admitted he'd pushed it through without consent. Said he'd told the clerk it was a sealed emergency. When I asked about the letters, he said he read every one. Said Marjorie wanted to tell me, but he insisted it would confuse things. When I asked why he lied to Jonathan, he looked down. Because I knew the truth would cost me everything. I thought if I could protect what I'd built, maybe the rest wouldn't matter. We sat there for over an hour. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. But I told him I heard him. Before we left, I asked him one last question. Do you ever look in the mirror and recognize the man looking back? He didn't answer right away. Not anymore, he said. I nodded. Then Donna and I walked out. We didn't speak much on the drive back. Donna sat beside me, her hand resting on the center console, close enough to feel, but not quite touching. The silence wasn't heavy. It was just full. When I dropped her off, she leaned in before getting out. "You did the hard thing," she said, "and you did it with grace." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I believed that yet. The next morning, I opened the windows wide. The air was warm, thick with the smell of early summer grass. I made coffee and sat with it on the porch, watching the neighborhood come to life. There was no letter in the mailbox that day, no reporters, no visitors. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't expect any. The following week, I hosted something small at my apartment. Just Donna, Daniel, Brooke, and a few friends who had stood with me through the worst of it. We cooked together in the kitchen, laughed at mismatched silverware, played old songs on a crackly speaker. It wasn't a celebration. It wasn't an apology. It was a moment to breathe. Later that night, I stood at the kitchen sink drying dishes, while Brooke sat at the table flipping through a binder of family documents. "You realize," she said, "this is the first time I've ever felt like this house belonged to us." I looked over my shoulder. "Us," she smiled. "You, me, Daniel, Donna. Not some polished version of what a family is supposed to be, just the real thing." I turned off the faucet and dried my hands. Donna came up behind me and placed a framed photo on the counter. It was one I hadn't seen before, her holding me as a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. "I kept this in a drawer," she said, waiting for a day I wasn't sure would come. I picked it up and held it carefully, my fingers tracing the edge of the frame. Some part of me had always wondered if the truth would shatter everything, if facing it would leave nothing to hold on to. But it didn't. It gave us something we hadn't had before, something honest. Weeks passed, then months. Life didn't return to what it was, but a new rhythm formed, one with fewer performances, fewer shadows. Clients who valued my father's name stepped back, others stepped forward, people drawn not by legacy, but by integrity. Brooke moved into a new apartment nearby. Daniel and I met for lunch more often. Donna visited each Sunday, always bringing something homemade. And I kept the letter from my father. Not framed, not tucked away, just there, folded creased, a part of the whole story. 1 year after the confrontation at Willowbrook, I organized another gathering. This time we didn't need permission. We didn't need a rented estate or a guest list approved by anyone else. We met at a local park under a white canopy tent. Donna brought lemonade. Brooke set up folding chairs. Daniel grilled hot dogs. A few of the people who once feared my father now stood at the front, sharing how speaking out helped them reclaim something they'd lost. No one wore name tags. No one gave speeches. We just showed up, as we were. And when the day ended and we hugged goodbye beneath a fading sky, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything had been fixed, but because nothing was hidden anymore. The truth cost us something, but it gave us something bigger in return. If you've ever had to let go of the version of family you were handed just to build the one you deserved, I hope you know you're not alone. Thanks for listening. And if this story reminded you of your own, I hope you'll share it. Someone out there might need to hear it.